She got into my car with a shy smile, the kind that seems to hide a lifetime of stories. Within the first few minutes, she called out to me in a way that left me speechless. "You remind me so much of my son." I didn't know what to say. I confess I was silent for a few seconds, trying to understand what she meant by that. But there was something in the way she looked at me, a sparkle in her eyes mixed with a deep sadness, that made me feel like this trip wouldn't be like the others. I'd already carried thousands of passengers, but something about that lady told me that this conversation would change my day and perhaps even the way I view life. What I didn't know was that, before getting out of the car, she would hand me something that seemed impossible, a message lost in time, written by someone who was no longer here, but who seemed to speak directly to me. When she got into the car, I immediately realized this wasn't just another ordinary ride. There was something different about her, a serene energy, yet at the same time charged with an ancient sadness. As I drove, I felt her watching me with an almost familiar attention, as if she'd known me from somewhere. In a few minutes of silence, the feeling grew even stronger, as if this encounter had been prepared by something greater than chance. I was used to distracted passengers, glued to their phones or rushing to get to an appointment, but she didn't seem in a hurry. On the contrary, she seemed willing to live every second of the journey. It was in this unexpected atmosphere that the ride began to transform into something much deeper than I'd imagined. Stories like these remind me that every ride can hold something unique and special. If you also believe that some encounters seem written by fate, take this opportunity to like and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss any of these real stories that show the more human and often surprising side of the life of a ride-hailing driver. Little by little, the ride took on a different tone than usual. I tried to focus on the traffic, but it was impossible not to feel the weight of that fixed gaze on me, as if my every gesture held a special meaning to her. After a few minutes of silence, the woman decided to strike up a conversation. Her first question was simple, something about how my day was going, but the way she spoke sounded more intimate than usual, almost as if we were resuming an old conversation long interrupted. I responded politely, still trying to grasp the intensity of that encounter. Soon after, she began asking personal questions. She wanted to know if I lived with my family, if I had any siblings, if I'd ever lost anyone important. I was a little surprised, because it wasn't common for passengers to delve so deeply into sensitive topics right away. Even so, there was something in the gentleness of her voice that kept me from backing away. It was as if every word was charged with a genuine need for connection, and I didn't have the heart to deny it. At one point, I noticed she started calling me by a name that wasn't mine. At first, I thought it was just a mistake, but when it happened again, I was struck by the strangeness. She spoke that name naturally, as if she was completely certain that was my name. I hesitated to correct her, but before I could say anything, I saw her eyes well up, and I realized there was something much deeper going on. As I drove, a mix of emotions washed over me. Part of me was uncomfortable, unsure how to react to such an unexpected situation, but another part felt a kind of silent compassion. It was as if I'd been put in that car, on that ride, precisely to be in front of her at that moment. Every time she repeated that name, I heard an immense longing in her voice, an emptiness that seemed never to be filled. Little by little, I began to understand that I wasn't just a passenger trying to make conversation. I was a mother who, in some way, was trying to rekindle a bond that had long since faded. And there, inside that car, I began to feel like I wasn't just a driver taking someone to their destination. I was becoming, even if only for a few minutes, a missing link between an old pain and the need to still believe in some kind of reunion, even if symbolic. The silence that followed the first questions seemed to carry an invisible weight. I sensed something important was about to be said, as if every word she held back was a secret she'd finally found space to let out. The woman took a deep breath, as if gathering courage, and then, with a choked voice, began to talk about her son. She said she'd lost him in a tragic accident years ago, and that since that day, life had never been the same. The way she described the moment seemed frozen in time, as if the accident had happened yesterday. In the intonation of each sentence, you could feel the pain of a wound that never healed. She said there wasn't a single day that went by that she didn't think about him, and that his absence had become a silent companion in every detail of her daily life. And on that particular day, the pain was even more intense because it would have been his birthday. As she spoke, her eyes filled with tears, which she tried to hold back, but which inevitably streamed down her face, scarred by the passing of time. I was speechless. There was nothing I could say that would be able to console such longing. The car seemed charged with a different energy, heavy, yet at the same time deeply human. I kept driving, but something inside me was shifting. That ride was no longer just a job. I was facing a life story, a pain so real and so profound that it penetrated any barrier of unfamiliarity between us. The way she looked at me, it was as if I had briefly taken the place of someone irreplaceable. Every time she repeated her son's name, her voice trembled, and I felt the strength of a bond that not even death seemed able to sever. In that moment, I realized the journey was no longer just a physical one, from one point in the city to another. It was an emotional journey, an unlikely encounter between two lives that had intersected precisely on the day her loneliness screamed loudest. There was no escaping the impact those words were having on me. I'd heard many stories during my time as a driver, but none so charged with pain and, at the same time, love. A love that persisted despite everything, even in absence, even in silence. As the tears continued to trickle down her face, I understood that this moment wasn't a coincidence. There was something bigger guiding that conversation, something that transcended logic and placed me there, in that front seat, listening to a rant that seemed to need to find an ear that very day, at that very hour. The ride was drawing to a close when I felt the atmosphere inside the car shift again. After sharing her grief, the woman remained silent for a few minutes. It was a thick silence, but not uncomfortable. I could tell she still had something to tell me, something perhaps more difficult than anything she had revealed so far. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon outside the window, but it was clear her mind was elsewhere, perhaps somewhere in the past where she could still hold her son's hand and hear his voice. When the car stopped in front of her destination, she didn't rush to get out. Instead, she remained seated, breathing deeply, as if gathering the courage to take a step that couldn't be undone. It was then that, with trembling hands, she opened her purse and took out a small, weathered envelope. She held it for a few seconds, staring at it as if it held not just paper and ink, but a part of her own soul. Then she held the envelope out to me. I hesitated to take it. I wasn't sure if I should accept it. After all, it was a gesture loaded with meaning I didn't yet understand. But her gaze was firm, full of tenderness and urgency. I took the envelope carefully, almost afraid it might fall apart in my hands. I opened it slowly, and inside was an old photograph, a faded portrait of a young man I immediately recognized as her son. Beside the photo was a short, handwritten message, the handwriting delicate and thick with emotion. The most striking thing was the feeling that washed over me as I read those words. Although the message had been written many years before, it seemed to speak directly to me, as if it had been destined to reach me at that very moment. It was impossible not to feel a shiver run through my body. It was as if time had bent over backward just to allow that moment to happen. The woman watched in silence, and in her eyes there was something between pain and relief. Perhaps handing over that envelope was a way to share a burden she'd carried alone for years. Perhaps it was also a way to keep her son's memory alive, allowing someone else, even if only for a moment, to see how much he'd been loved. I didn't know how to react. I just remained still, holding that photograph as if it were a relic, feeling like I held a piece of eternity in my hands. At that moment, I understood that I wasn't just a driver who had crossed her path by chance. I was the chosen destination to receive a message that had withstood the test of time, a link between a painful past and a present that insisted that nothing, absolutely nothing, happens without a reason. I held that envelope for a few more seconds, unsure of what to say. It was as if time had stopped inside the car. Everything around me disappeared. The noise of the street, the movement of people, even the clock seemed to have slowed down. All that remained was me, that lady, and the indescribable feeling that something bigger was happening. As I looked at the photograph and reread the message, an avalanche of thoughts took over me. It wasn't just about her pain, nor about the longing that never went away. It was about the way life, in mysterious ways, seems to put us exactly where we need to be. How often do we cross paths with people without realizing the weight they carry? How often does a simple encounter, meant to last just a few minutes, turn into something capable of completely changing the way we see the world? In that moment, I understood that random encounters can actually be hidden messages from the universe. Perhaps it's life reminding us that we're not alone, or perhaps it's something even greater, something spiritual, that acts in ways our reason can't explain. The way she looked at me, the way she mistook me for her son, the fact that it was precisely on his birthday, everything seemed aligned, as if every detail had been carefully written before it even happened. I felt immense gratitude for having been there. As painful as it was, I knew I had made a difference to her that day. I might never see her again, but those few hours in the car had become unforgettable. It was proof that small interactions, no matter how brief, can carry enormous weight, capable of transforming not only someone's day, but also our own hearts. As she finally said goodbye, carrying with her the same longing, I wondered how many stories like this go unnoticed around us. How many encounters carry lessons, signs, or even messages that we don't immediately understand, but which, over time, prove fundamental to our journey. Life, I realized, has its own ways of touching us. Sometimes it speaks through people, through glances, through coincidences that seem small but, deep down, are anything but coincidence. And it was at that moment that I understood, this wasn't just another race. It was a reminder that even the most ordinary paths can hold extraordinary signs, meant to awaken us to the value of every moment and every person who crosses our path. When I opened the envelope and found the old photograph, my heart was already racing. The smiling young face in the image seemed to carry a vibrant energy, as if it were still present somehow. Beside the photo was a small, handwritten note, written in the delicate but firm handwriting of someone who wanted those words to endure. I read it silently, trying to absorb every detail. On the paper was written, "Never forget to smile. Wherever I am, I'll always be with you. Keep living, because your happiness keeps my memory alive." As soon as I finished reading, I felt a shiver run through my body. Those words, though written years ago, felt as if they were meant for me at that very moment. It was impossible not to believe there was something greater at play, something that transcends logic and that somehow connects people at unseen points in life. The lady watched me silently, and her gaze said it all. Perhaps she had read that note 1,000 times, but handing it to me seemed to give those words new meaning. It wasn't just a message from the past. It was a reminder of the present, a call to cherish every moment, even in the face of pain that never fades. Stories like this make me think about how nothing in life happens by chance. Sometimes, a simple encounter that should only last a few minutes turns into an experience that leaves a lasting impression. That lady could have picked up any other driver that day, but for some reason I may never be able to explain, she got into my car. And it was there, in that small, quiet space, that I received one of the most powerful messages I've ever experienced. The photo, the note, the way she looked at me as she handed them to me, everything seemed carefully orchestrated to make me understand something greater, that every moment can carry a hidden purpose, even when we can't immediately see it. I left that race different than I entered. More attentive, more grateful, more aware that each person who crosses our path can bring with them a lesson, a sign, or even a piece of eternity. And that's why I want to share this story with you, who are listening now. Because perhaps it also has something to say about your own life. Perhaps you've experienced a similar moment, when someone or some situation appeared at just the right time, bringing a message that seemed written especially for you. If this has happened to you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. I want to read your experience, because stories like these deserve to be remembered and shared. If this race touched your heart in any way, please like and subscribe to Backseat Secrets. Your every interaction is the fuel that keeps this channel alive, bringing you real stories, full of emotion and humanity, that show that even the most ordinary situations can contain something extraordinary. Ultimately, we never know when life will surprise us. But if there's one thing we're certain of, it's that every encounter carries the chance to change our day, or even our destiny. Thank you for sticking with me this far and following this special story. Every time I share a ride like this, I realize that a driver's job goes far beyond getting someone from one point to another. Sometimes, we're chosen to listen, welcome, and even carry messages that transcend time and understanding. If this story touched your heart, I'd like you to like and subscribe to Backseat Secrets. This makes all the difference in helping us continue to bring you real, moving, and meaningful stories, showing that even inside an ordinary car, encounters can happen that can change everything. And now I want to hear from you. Has there ever been a moment in your life when everything seemed like a coincidence, but deep down you felt there was a greater purpose behind it? An encounter, a word, a gesture, something that seemed written especially for you? Share it in the comments, because I'd love to hear your story, and I'm sure others will be moved by it too. See you in the next video. Until then, take care, cherish every moment, and never underestimate the power of an unexpected encounter. After all, the next story could very well be yours.